Maria Santos had always believed that some people were born to be noticed, while others were meant to blend into the background. At 52 years old, she had spent most of her life proving this theory correct. Standing barely 5 feet tall with graying hair that she kept pulled back in a simple ponytail, Maria moved through the world like a shadow, present but rarely acknowledged. Every morning at 4:30 a.m., her alarm clock would ring in the small apartment she shared with her elderly mother in San Antonio, Texas. The sound always startled her, even though she had been waking up at this time for over 15 years. She would slip out of bed quietly, careful not to wake her mother, who suffered from arthritis and needed every moment of sleep she could get. The bathroom mirror reflected back a face that Maria barely recognized as her own anymore. When had the lines around her eyes become so deep? When had her shoulders started to curve forward from years of bending over cleaning supplies and hospital equipment? She would splash cold water on her face, brush her teeth with a toothbrush that had seen better days, and pull her hair back into the same style she had worn since she was 20. By 5:15 a.m., Maria was dressed in her work uniform, a pair of blue scrubs that had faded from countless washings, and white tennis shoes that squeaked slightly when she walked on the hospital's polished floors. The uniform had her name embroidered on the chest pocket in simple black letters: Maria Santos, Environmental Services. Most people didn't bother to read it. The bus ride to Brooke Army Medical Center took exactly 43 minutes, including the transfer downtown. Maria always sat in the same seat if it was available, third row from the back, on the right side, next to the window. She would watch the city wake up around her as the bus made its way through the morning traffic. Office workers in crisp suits hurried past with coffee cups and briefcases, their faces buried in their phones. Students backpacked their way to classes at the university. Families rushed children to school. Maria observed it all with a quiet attention that had become second nature to her. She noticed things that others missed: the way the morning light hit the old courthouse building, how the homeless man who always sat near the bus stop had gotten a new coat, the fact that the coffee shop on Main Street had finally fixed their broken neon sign. But her observations remained locked inside her head, shared with no one. At the hospital, Maria would clock in at exactly 6 a.m. using the old-time punch machine that sat in the basement employee break room. The room smelled like microwaved food and industrial coffee, with fluorescent lights that hummed constantly overhead. She would grab her cleaning cart from the supply closet and begin her route through the hospital. Ward 3A was always her first stop. This was the intensive care unit, where the most critically injured soldiers received treatment. The hallways were wider here to accommodate all the medical equipment, and the walls were painted a calming shade of blue-green that was supposed to promote healing. Maria knew every inch of these hallways, every scuff mark on the floor, every place where the paint had chipped, every window that didn't quite close properly. She moved through her work with a practiced efficiency that came from years of repetition. Empty the trash cans, replace the liners, mop the floors, wipe down surfaces, stock the supply closets, clean the bathrooms. Room by room, hallway by hallway, Maria made the hospital a little cleaner, a little more comfortable for the patients and their families who passed through its doors. The doctors and nurses who worked in Ward 3A had grown accustomed to her presence over the years. They would nod politely when they saw her, sometimes even offering a brief "good morning" if they weren't too busy. But, for the most part, Maria was simply part of the background, as invisible as the walls she cleaned or the floors she mopped. Dr. Jennifer Martinez was one of the few staff members who made an effort to acknowledge Maria beyond the basic pleasantries. She was a young surgeon who had started working at the hospital about 3 years ago, fresh out of her residency program. Dr. Martinez would sometimes stop to ask Maria about her mother or comment on how well the floors looked after Maria had finished cleaning them. "You do such good work, Maria," Dr. Martinez had said just last week as she was leaving Ward 3A after a particularly long surgery. "I don't know what we would do without you." Maria had smiled and thanked her, but the words felt hollow somehow. She appreciated Dr. Martinez's kindness, but she also knew that if she didn't show up for work tomorrow, someone else would be hired to push the same cart down the same hallways. The hospital would keep running, the patients would still be cared for, and within a few weeks, most people would forget that Maria Santos had ever existed. This feeling of invisibility wasn't limited to her work life. In her neighborhood, Maria was known as the quiet woman who lived with her mother in apartment 2B. She would wave to her neighbors when she saw them in the hallway or at the mailboxes, but conversations rarely went beyond discussing the weather or complaining about the building's old plumbing. At the grocery store, cashiers would scan her items and hand her receipts without making eye contact. At the bank, tellers would process her transactions with practiced efficiency, their minds already moving on to the next customer in line. Even at church, where Maria attended Mass every Sunday with her mother, she felt like just another face in the crowd of parishioners. Her mother, Rosa Santos, had been the center of Maria's world for as long as she could remember. Rosa had raised Maria as a single mother after Maria's father left when she was just 3 years old. They had always been a team, Rosa working double shifts at the textile factory while Maria went to school, both of them pooling their resources to make ends meet. Now, at 78, Rosa's health was declining. Her arthritis made it difficult for her to get around, and her memory wasn't as sharp as it used to be. Some days, she would ask Maria the same question 3 or 4 times, forgetting that they had already discussed whether they needed to buy milk or when her next doctor's appointment was scheduled. Maria didn't mind taking care of her mother. In fact, it gave her a sense of purpose that she couldn't find anywhere else. When she helped Rosa get dressed in the morning or prepared her medication for the week, Maria felt necessary. She felt seen. Even if the rest of the world overlooked her, her mother still needed her. But there were moments, usually late at night when Rosa was sleeping and the apartment was quiet, when Maria would sit at the small kitchen table and wonder what her life might have been like if she had made different choices. She had been a good student in high school, with dreams of becoming a teacher. Her English teacher, Mrs. Davidson, had even encouraged her to apply for college scholarships. "You have a gift for connecting with people, Maria," Mrs. Davidson had told her during their last conference before graduation. "You notice things that others miss. You could make a real difference in children's lives." But scholarships required essays and interviews, applications that needed to be submitted by specific deadlines. Maria had been working part-time at a local restaurant to help her mother pay the bills, and between school and work, she had never found the time to complete the applications properly. The deadlines passed, the opportunities disappeared, and Maria found herself taking a job at a local hotel, cleaning rooms, and making beds. The hotel job had led to the hospital job, which had led to 15 years of moving through the same routines, cleaning the same rooms, feeling increasingly invisible with each passing day. Not that Maria regretted her choices. She had been able to help her mother, to provide stability when Rosa's arthritis forced her to stop working. But sometimes, in those quiet moments, she wondered if Mrs. Davidson had been right about her having a gift for connecting with people. At work, Maria had developed a routine of arriving early to check on some of the long-term patients in Ward 3A. These were soldiers who had been severely injured and were facing long recovery periods. Their rooms were always included in her cleaning schedule, but Maria would often stop by before her shift officially started to water their plants or adjust their window blinds to let in more natural light. She never spoke to the patients. Most of them were either sleeping or too medicated to engage in conversation. But she noticed things about them that others might miss. She knew that the young soldier in room 312 liked his blinds open just enough to let in light, but not enough to create glare on his television screen. The patient in room 318 always seemed more comfortable when his water pitcher was filled with fresh ice, not just water from the tap. These small acts of attention went unnoticed by the medical staff, who were focused on more pressing concerns like medication schedules and treatment plans. But Maria continued to perform them anyway, finding a small sense of satisfaction in making these soldiers' recovery periods just a little more comfortable. One morning in March, as Maria was finishing her early rounds in Ward 3A, she noticed that room 315 had a new patient. Through the partially open door, she could see a young woman lying in the hospital bed, her left leg elevated and wrapped in bandages. The woman appeared to be sleeping, but Maria could see tear tracks on her cheeks, evidence of recent crying. Without thinking, Maria quietly entered the room to empty the trash can. As she worked, she noticed that the woman's water pitcher was empty and that someone had left the television on a news channel that was showing footage of explosions and military vehicles. Maria quickly changed the channel to something more peaceful, a nature documentary about birds, and refilled the water pitcher with fresh ice and water. As she was about to leave, the young woman opened her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I couldn't reach the remote to change the channel. The news was making me anxious." Maria paused at the doorway. "You're welcome," she said softly. "Is there anything else you need? I can ask one of the nurses to—" "No," The woman interrupted gently. Just, thank you for noticing. For the rest of that day, Maria thought about those words, thank you for noticing. It was such a simple phrase, but it carried so much weight. In a world where Maria felt constantly overlooked, this young soldier had seen her, really seen her, and had recognized that Maria's small act of kindness mattered. The next morning, Maria made sure to stop by room 315 during her early rounds. The young woman, her chart identified her as Specialist Jennifer Rodriguez, was awake and sitting up in bed, working on what appeared to be a crossword puzzle. Good morning, Maria said as she entered to clean the room. How are you feeling today? Better, thank you, Jennifer replied. I wanted to ask you yesterday, what's your name? I see it on your uniform, but I couldn't read it clearly. Maria Santos, she answered, surprised that anyone had bothered to ask. Well, Maria Santos, I'm Jennifer Rodriguez. And I want you to know that what you did yesterday, changing the channel, getting fresh water, it meant a lot to me. More than you probably realize. Over the following days, Maria found herself looking forward to her stops in room 315. Jennifer was recovering from injuries she had sustained in an improvised explosive device attack in Afghanistan. She had been serving as a combat medic when her convoy was hit, and while she had managed to save 3 of her fellow soldiers before the medical evacuation helicopter arrived, she had sustained significant injuries to her leg and back. Jennifer was facing months of physical therapy and an uncertain future regarding her military career. Some days she was optimistic and focused on her recovery exercises. Other days she was withdrawn and frustrated by her limitations. But, regardless of her mood, she always acknowledged Maria when she came to clean the room, always took the time to ask about her day or thank her for some small kindness. You know, Jennifer said one morning as Maria was organizing the medical supplies on her bedside table, I've been thinking about what I want to do when I get out of here. I used to think I knew exactly what my future looked like. Career military, maybe become a physician assistant, serve for 20 years, and retire. But this injury has made me reconsider everything. Maria continued her work, but she was listening intently. It had been a long time since anyone had shared their thoughts and plans with her in such a personal way. I think what I really want to do is work with other veterans who are going through similar recoveries, Jennifer continued. Help them navigate the system, connect them with resources, maybe even help them find purpose again. I've realized how easy it is to feel lost and invisible when you're in a place like this. The word invisible struck Maria like a physical blow. She stopped what she was doing and looked directly at Jennifer. What do you mean by invisible? She asked. Jennifer considered the question carefully. I mean feeling like you don't matter to anyone, like your problems and struggles are too small for others to notice or care about. Like you could disappear tomorrow, and the world would keep spinning without missing a beat. Maria nodded slowly. She understood exactly what Jennifer meant. But that's not true, is it? Jennifer continued. I mean, you've shown me that every person matters, that every small act of kindness makes a difference. The way you've taken care of me and the other patients here, you notice things that others miss. You make this place better just by being here. Maria felt a warmth spreading through her chest that she hadn't experienced in years. For so long, she had believed that her work didn't really matter, that she was just going through the motions of a job that anyone could do. But Jennifer's words suggested something different, that Maria's attention to detail, her quiet acts of care, had a real impact on the people around her. That evening, as Maria sat at her kitchen table helping her mother sort through old photographs, she found herself thinking about her conversation with Jennifer. Maybe she wasn't as invisible as she had always believed. Maybe the problem wasn't that she didn't matter, but that she had stopped believing she mattered. Mija, her mother said, using the Spanish term of endearment she had called Maria since childhood, you seem different tonight. Happier somehow. Maria looked up from the photographs. Do I? Yes. You're smiling. It's been a long time since I've seen you smile like that. Maria realized her mother was right. She was smiling, and she hadn't even noticed. For the first time in years, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. She just hadn't been looking at it the right way. The next morning, Maria arrived at work with a sense of anticipation she hadn't felt in years. She was eager to check on Jennifer and the other patients, to continue the small acts of care that she was beginning to understand had more meaning than she had ever realized. But, as she clocked in and retrieved her cleaning cart, Maria had no idea that this day would change everything, that a chance encounter was about to transform not only how others saw her, but how she saw herself. The morning of March 15th started like any other day for Maria Santos. But the energy in Brooke Army Medical Center felt different. There was a buzz of activity that extended beyond the usual morning routines. Nurses were moving with extra purpose, administrators were huddled in small groups, checking their phones and clipboards, and even the housekeeping staff seemed more alert than usual. Maria noticed the change immediately as she made her way through the hospital corridors with her cleaning cart. She had always been observant, picking up on subtle shifts in atmosphere that others might miss. The fluorescent lights seemed brighter somehow. The conversations at the nurses' stations were more animated, and there was an underlying current of excitement mixed with nervous energy throughout the building. "Did you hear?" whispered Janet Morrison, one of the night shift nurses who was just finishing her rounds. She caught Maria's attention as she was preparing to enter room 308. "We're getting a very important visitor today. Someone from the Pentagon." Maria paused, her hand on the door handle. "A visitor? Not just any visitor," Janet continued, lowering her voice even further. "A 4-star general, General Patricia Hayes. She's coming to meet with some of the wounded soldiers and tour the facility. The whole administrative staff has been preparing for weeks." General Patricia Hayes. Even Maria, who didn't follow military news closely, had heard that name. General Hayes was one of the highest-ranking women in the United States Army, known for her leadership during several international conflicts and her advocacy for wounded veterans. She was the kind of person who appeared on television news programs and whose opinions shaped military policy at the highest levels. "When is she supposed to arrive?" Maria asked, though she wasn't sure why she was curious. It wasn't as if a 4-star general would notice someone like her during an official visit. "This afternoon, around 2 o'clock, Janet replied. "The whole place is going to be crawling with security personnel and media. They're bringing camera crews to document her visit with the patients." As Janet hurried away to finish her shift, Maria continued with her morning routine, but her mind kept returning to the idea of General Hayes walking through these same hallways. What would it be like to have that kind of presence, to enter a room and immediately command attention and respect? Maria tried to imagine it, but found the concept so foreign to her own experience that she couldn't quite grasp it. She made her way to Jennifer Rodriguez's room, where she had been stopping regularly for the past 2 weeks. Jennifer was awake and sitting up in bed, working on physical therapy exercises with her good leg. Her injured leg was still elevated, but the swelling had gone down significantly, and she seemed to be in better spirits than she had been in days. "Good morning, Jennifer," Maria said as she entered the room. "How are you feeling today?" "Much better, actually," Jennifer replied, pausing in her exercises. "The physical therapist says I'm making excellent progress. I might even be able to start using crutches next week." Maria smiled as she began her cleaning routine. She had grown genuinely fond of Jennifer over the past 2 weeks, looking forward to their brief conversations each morning. Jennifer had a way of making Maria feel seen and valued that was completely new in her experience. "I heard there's going to be some excitement around here today," Maria mentioned as she emptied the trash can. "A general is coming to visit." "General Hayes," Jennifer nodded. "Word travels fast around here. She's supposed to meet with several of the wounded soldiers this afternoon. I'm one of them, actually." Maria stopped what she was doing and looked directly at Jennifer. "You are? That's wonderful. She must think very highly of your service." Jennifer shrugged, but Maria could see a mixture of pride and nervousness in her expression. "I don't know about that. I think she's just trying to meet with soldiers who represent different types of injuries and recovery experiences. My case is pretty typical, unfortunately. IED attack, multiple injuries, long recovery ahead." "There's nothing typical about what you've been through," Maria said firmly, "or about how you've handled it. You've been so strong, so positive even when you're having difficult days. Any general would be honored to meet you." Jennifer smiled, and Maria could see that her words had meant something. It occurred to Maria that she had never spoken so directly to anyone about their worth before, had never felt confident enough in her own opinions to offer that kind of encouragement. But something about her relationship with Jennifer had brought out a side of herself that she hadn't known existed. "Thank you, Maria," Jennifer said softly. "I've been nervous about meeting her, to be honest. I keep thinking about what I should say, how I should present myself. But talking to you always helps me feel more grounded." Maria continued her work, but Jennifer's words stayed with her throughout the morning. The idea that she, Maria Santos, could help someone feel grounded seemed almost impossible. Yet here was evidence to the contrary. A brave, intelligent young soldier who found comfort and strength in their brief daily conversations. As the morning progressed, the activity level in the hospital continued to increase. Security personnel arrived early to sweep the building and establish protocols for the general's visit. Administrative staff members who Maria had rarely seen outside their offices were now walking the halls, checking on last-minute preparations and ensuring that everything would run smoothly. Maria found herself paying closer attention to her work than usual, making sure that every surface was spotless, every trash can properly emptied, every supply closet perfectly organized. She wasn't sure why she felt compelled to do this. It wasn't as if the general would be inspecting her work areas, but she couldn't shake the feeling that today was important in some way she didn't fully understand. During her lunch break, Maria sat in the employee break room and watched as several of her coworkers discussed the upcoming visit. There was a mixture of excitement and anxiety in their voices as they speculated about what the general would be like and whether they might catch a glimpse of her during her tour of the facility. "I heard she's really impressive in person," said Carlos Martinez, one of the maintenance supervisors. "My cousin works at Fort Sam Houston, and he met her once during a ceremony. Said she has this way of looking at you like you're the most important person in the room. I wonder what she'll think of our facility," added Susan Chun, a nurse from Ward 2B. "We do good work here, but we're not exactly state-of-the-art. Some of our equipment is pretty outdated." Maria listened to the conversation without contributing, as was her usual habit. But she found herself thinking about Susan's comment regarding the facility's limitations. It was true that Brooke Army Medical Center wasn't the newest or most technologically advanced military hospital, but Maria had worked there long enough to know that the quality of care provided had nothing to do with the age of the equipment. She thought about Dr. Martinez, who stayed late every evening to check on her patients personally rather than simply reviewing their charts. She thought about the nurses who took extra time to explain procedures to frightened family members, who brought magazines from home for patients who were facing long recovery periods. She thought about the physical therapists who celebrated every small victory with their patients, who never gave up hope even when progress seemed impossibly slow. Most of all, she thought about the countless small acts of kindness and care that happened throughout the hospital every day. Acts that wouldn't show up in any official report or media coverage, but that made all the difference in the world to the people who experienced them. By 1:30 p.m., word had spread throughout the hospital that General Hayes's motorcade had arrived at the main entrance. Maria was finishing her afternoon cleaning rounds in Ward 3A when she heard the commotion beginning in the lobby area. Even from several floors away, she could hear the sounds of increased activity, multiple voices, footsteps, and the general buzz that accompanies any significant event. She completed her work in the supply closet and was preparing to move her cart to the next area when Dr. Martinez approached her in the hallway. "Maria, I wanted to let you know that General Hayes will be touring Ward 3A this afternoon as part of her visit," Dr. Martinez said. "She'll be meeting with several of our patients, including Jennifer Rodriguez. I just wanted to give you a heads up in case you wanted to. I don't know, maybe finish your work in other areas first to avoid the crowds." Maria understood what Dr. Martinez was trying to do. She was offering Maria a way to make herself scarce during the general's visit, recognizing that Maria might feel uncomfortable with all the attention and media coverage that would accompany such a high-profile tour. "Thank you for letting me know," Maria replied. "I'll work around the schedule." But as Dr. Martinez walked away, Maria realized she didn't want to avoid the general's visit. She was curious about this woman who commanded such respect and attention, who had risen to the highest levels of military leadership in a profession dominated by men. More than that, she wanted to be nearby when Jennifer met with General Hayes. Jennifer had become important to her, and Maria found herself hoping that the general would see in Jennifer the same strength and resilience that Maria had observed over the past 2 weeks. Instead of moving her cart to a different area, Maria decided to complete her remaining work in Ward 3A. She worked efficiently, trying to finish everything before the general's tour reached this section of the hospital. But as she was cleaning the windows in the hallway outside Jennifer's room, she heard the sound of approaching footsteps and voices. General Patricia Hayes was exactly as imposing as Maria had expected her to be, but in a way that felt commanding rather than intimidating. She was a tall woman with silver hair pulled back in a perfect military style, wearing a dress uniform decorated with numerous ribbons and insignia that spoke to decades of distinguished service. But what struck Maria most was the way she carried herself, with confidence and authority, yes, but also with a warmth and genuine interest in everything around her. She was accompanied by a small entourage that included hospital administrators, her own military aide, and a couple of journalists who were documenting her visit. But, despite the crowd of people surrounding her, General Hayes seemed completely focused on each patient she met, giving them her full attention and treating each conversation as if it were the most important part of her day. Maria positioned herself near the nurse's station where she could observe without being intrusive. She watched as General Hayes entered Jennifer's room, and even though she couldn't hear the conversation clearly, she could see through the partially open door that Jennifer was sitting up straighter, her face animated as she spoke with the general. The conversation seemed to last longer than the previous patient meetings, and Maria found herself wondering what they were discussing. She could see General Hayes nodding seriously at something Jennifer was saying, and, at one point, the general even pulled up a chair to sit closer to Jennifer's bedside, a gesture that seemed to surprise even her own aide. When General Hayes finally emerged from Jennifer's room, Maria could see that both women were smiling. Jennifer's face was glowing with what appeared to be excitement, and maybe even a little disbelief, while General Hayes had the satisfied expression of someone who had just had a meaningful conversation. As the tour group prepared to move on to the next section of the ward, Maria quickly returned her attention to her cleaning supplies, not wanting to appear as though she had been watching. But, as she organized the items on her cart, she became aware that the hallway had grown quiet, and, when she looked up, she realized that General Hayes had stopped walking and was looking directly at her. "Excuse me," General Hayes said, her voice carrying the clear authority of someone accustomed to being heard and obeyed. "Are you Maria Santos?" Maria's heart nearly stopped. How could General Hayes possibly know her name? She looked around quickly to see if there was someone else the general might be addressing, but the hallway was empty except for Maria and the general's entourage. "Yes, ma'am," Maria replied, her voice barely above a whisper. General Hayes stepped away from her group and approached Maria directly. "Specialist Rodriguez mentioned you to me. She spoke very highly of the care you've provided during her recovery." Maria felt her face growing warm with embarrassment. She couldn't believe that Jennifer had mentioned her to someone as important as a four-star general. I cleaned the rooms, ma'am. It's nothing special." "According to Jennifer, it's much more than that," General Hayes said, her tone serious but kind. "She told me that you've gone out of your way to make her recovery more comfortable, changing television channels to something peaceful, making sure her water is always fresh, adjusting her blinds just the way she likes them. She said you notice things that others miss, and that you care enough to act on what you notice." Maria didn't know how to respond. She had never thought of her small gestures as anything worth discussing, let alone worth mentioning to a visiting general. I wanted to help," she managed to say. "That's exactly my point," General Hayes replied. "You wanted to help, and you found ways to help, even though caring for patients' comfort isn't technically part of your job description. That kind of initiative and compassion is exactly what makes the difference between a good military hospital and an exceptional one." Maria felt tears beginning to form in her eyes. In her 15 years of working at the hospital, no one had ever described her work in such terms. She had always thought of herself as just another employee doing a necessary but unremarkable job. The idea that her actions had been noticed and appreciated, and by a four-star general, no less, seemed almost impossible to believe. "Jennifer also told me that you've been a source of encouragement during her recovery," General Hayes continued. "She said that your daily conversations have helped her maintain a positive outlook during some very difficult days. That's not something you can put in a job manual, Maria. That comes from the heart." By now, Maria was aware that the general's entire entourage was watching this conversation, including the journalists who were documenting the visit. She felt exposed and vulnerable, standing there in her faded uniform with her simple cleaning cart, being addressed personally by one of the most powerful women in the American military. But General Hayes seemed to sense her discomfort and took a step closer, speaking in a quieter tone that made their conversation feel more private despite the audience. "I want you to know something, Maria," General Hayes said. "I've been in the military for over 30 years, and I've seen a lot of hospitals and met a lot of people who work in them. The doctors and nurses get most of the recognition, and they deserve it. But I've learned that the true measure of a medical facility isn't just the quality of the surgical procedures or the sophistication of the equipment. It's the care and attention that patients receive every day from people like you. People who see them as human beings, not just medical cases." General Hayes paused, seeming to consider her words carefully before continuing. What you do matters, Maria, more than you know. And I want to thank you, personally and on behalf of every wounded soldier who has been treated here, for the care and compassion you bring to your work every single day. With that, General Hayes extended her hand to Maria. Maria stared at it for a moment, hardly able to believe that a four-star general was offering to shake hands with someone like her. But when she finally reached out to accept the gesture, General Hayes's handshake was firm and warm, accompanied by a smile that seemed genuinely appreciative. "Keep doing what you're doing, Maria," General Hayes said. "The Army needs more people like you." As quickly as the moment had begun, it was over. General Hayes rejoined her entourage and continued down the hallway, leaving Maria standing alone with her cleaning cart, trying to process what had just happened. She could hear the general's voice continuing down the corridor as the tour moved on to the next section of the ward, but Maria remained frozen in place. Had that conversation really just occurred? Had a four-star general really stopped her official tour to personally thank Maria for her work? The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Maria completed her remaining cleaning duties mechanically, her mind constantly returning to her encounter with General Hayes. She kept expecting to wake up and discover that the entire experience had been some kind of elaborate daydream. But when she stopped by Jennifer's room before the end of her shift, the reality of what had happened became undeniable. "Maria," Jennifer exclaimed as soon as she saw her. "I can't believe General Hayes actually stopped to talk to you. When I mentioned you during our conversation, I never imagined she would seek you out personally." "You really told her about me?" Maria asked, still struggling to understand how she had ended up in such an extraordinary situation. "Of course I did," Jennifer replied. "How could I not? When she asked about the quality of care I'd received here, you were one of the first things I thought to mention. I told her that while the medical staff has been excellent, it was the daily kindness from people like you that made the biggest difference in my recovery." Maria sat down in the visitor's chair next to Jennifer's bed, something she had never done before during her cleaning rounds. "I never thought. I just wanted to help make things a little easier for you. I had no idea it would matter so much." "That's exactly why it matters so much," Jennifer said earnestly. "Because you did it without expecting anything in return, without even thinking anyone would notice. You did it because you saw someone who was struggling and you wanted to help." As Maria finally made her way home that evening, her mind was spinning with thoughts and emotions she had never experienced before. For the first time in her adult life, she felt truly seen and valued for who she was and what she contributed to the world. But she had no idea that her encounter with General Hayes would soon change her life in ways she could never have imagined. The next morning, Maria arrived at work expecting everything to return to normal. She assumed that General Hayes's visit would become just another memory, a brief moment when someone important had noticed her before the regular routine resumed. But as she clocked in and retrieved her cleaning cart, she quickly realized that nothing was quite the same as it had been the day before. "Maria," called out Janet Morrison, the nurse who had told her about General Hayes's visit. "I heard about what happened yesterday. Everyone's talking about it." Maria felt her face flush with embarrassment. She had hoped that her encounter with the general would remain a private moment, something special that she could treasure without it becoming the subject of workplace gossip. "It wasn't really anything," she said quietly, trying to downplay the significance of what had occurred. "Are you kidding?" Janet continued, clearly excited to discuss the events. "A four-star general stopped her official tour to personally thank you for your work. Do you have any idea how extraordinary that is? I've been working in military hospitals for 12 years, and I've never seen anything like it." As Maria made her way through the hospital corridors with her cleaning cart, she noticed that other staff members were looking at her differently. Some smiled and nodded with what appeared to be newfound respect, while others whispered to their colleagues as she passed by. The attention made her uncomfortable, but there was also something else, a small sense of pride that she had never experienced before in her professional life. Dr. Martinez stopped her near the elevator bank as she was transitioning between floors. "Maria, I wanted to congratulate you on yesterday's recognition from General Hayes. It was well-deserved, and I'm glad she took the time to acknowledge your contributions." "Thank you, Dr. Martinez," Maria replied, still unsure how to respond to such compliments. "I just do my job." "You do much more than that," Dr. Martinez insisted. "I've been watching you work for 3 years, and I've seen how you interact with our patients. What General Hayes said yesterday was absolutely accurate. You provide a level of care that goes well beyond what's required." As Dr. Martinez walked away, Maria found herself thinking about her words. She had always assumed that the medical staff barely noticed her presence, that she was simply part of the background operations that kept the hospital running. The idea that Dr. Martinez had been observing her work and forming positive opinions about it was both surprising and gratifying. When she reached Jennifer's room, she found Jennifer sitting in a wheelchair for the first time since her arrival at the hospital. Her injured leg was still elevated on a special support, but she was clearly excited about this milestone in her recovery. "Look at me," Jennifer said with a big smile as Maria entered the room. "The physical therapist says I can start spending a few hours each day in the wheelchair. It's amazing how good it feels to be sitting upright in something other than a hospital bed." Maria couldn't help but smile in return. Over the past few weeks, she had witnessed Jennifer's gradual progress from a frightened, injured soldier to someone who was beginning to reclaim her independence and optimism. "That's wonderful news. You must be so relieved to have some mobility back." "I am, but that's not the only exciting news I have," Jennifer said, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "I got a call this morning from General Hayes' office. Apparently, she was so impressed with her visit here yesterday that she wants to feature our hospital in a special report about military medical care." Maria paused in her cleaning routine. "A special report?" "Yes, they're going to bring a television crew back next week to film a segment about the quality of care that wounded soldiers receive here. And here's the really amazing part. General Hayes specifically requested that you be included in the filming." Maria nearly dropped the cleaning supplies she was holding. "Me? But I don't understand why she would want to include me." "Because you're an important part of the story," Jennifer explained patiently. "She wants to show that excellent medical care isn't just about the doctors and nurses and high-tech equipment. It's also about the people who create an environment of healing and compassion." She said that meeting you yesterday reminded her of what military medicine is supposed to be about, taking care of our people in every possible way. The idea of appearing on television was terrifying to Maria. She had spent her entire adult life trying to blend into the background, avoiding attention and conflict. The thought of having cameras pointed at her, of her image being broadcast to potentially millions of people, made her feel physically ill. "I can't do that," Maria said quickly. "I wouldn't know what to say. I'm not good at talking to people I don't know." Jennifer's expression became more serious. "Maria, can I tell you something? Yesterday, when I was talking to General Hayes, she asked me about the people who had made the biggest difference in my recovery. I mentioned the doctors and nurses, of course, but I also told her about you. And when I described how you had taken the time to notice small things about my comfort and well-being, her whole face lit up." Jennifer paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "She told me that in all her years of visiting military hospitals, she rarely encounters staff members who truly understand that healing is about more than just medical procedures. She said that what you do, the attention you pay to patients' emotional and psychological comfort, is exactly what she wishes she could see more of throughout the military medical system." Maria sat down in the visitor's chair, trying to process what Jennifer was telling her. "But I'm not special. Any of the housekeeping staff would do the same things if they thought about it. But they don't think about it," Jennifer replied gently. "That's what makes you special. You see needs that others don't see, and you take action to meet those needs without being asked. That's not something you can teach someone. It's something that comes from who you are as a person." Over the next few days, Maria found herself the subject of more attention than she had ever experienced in her life. Word of General Hayes' recognition had spread throughout the hospital, and people who had never spoken to her before were now making an effort to acknowledge her work. Carlos Martinez, the maintenance supervisor, stopped her in the hallway to tell her that he had always admired her dedication but had never found the right opportunity to mention it. Susan Chun, the nurse from Ward 2B, shared that she had noticed how patients seemed more comfortable and relaxed after Maria had cleaned their rooms, but had never connected that observation to Maria's specific approach to her work. Even some of the patients began to recognize her in a new way. Mrs. Williams, an elderly woman who was recovering from hip surgery, thanked Maria for always making sure the flowers by her window were properly positioned to catch the morning light. Lieutenant Thompson, a young soldier who had lost his hearing in an explosion, wrote her a note expressing appreciation for the way she always made sure to face him when she entered his room, making it easier for him to read her lips when she spoke. Maria was overwhelmed by these expressions of gratitude and recognition. She had performed these small acts of consideration for years without really thinking about them, certainly without expecting anyone to notice or appreciate them. The realization that her attention to detail had made a meaningful difference in people's lives was both humbling and profoundly moving. But the prospect of the television interview still filled her with dread. When James Patterson, the hospital's public relations coordinator, approached her about scheduling a pre-interview meeting, Maria's first instinct was to decline the entire opportunity. "I appreciate that General Hayes thought of me," Maria told Patterson as they sat in his small office near the main administrative area. "But I really don't think I'm the right person for this kind of thing. I'm not comfortable on camera, and I wouldn't know what to say." Patterson, a middle-aged man who had worked in military public relations for over a decade, leaned back in his chair and studied Maria with a thoughtful expression. "Can I ask you something, Maria? When you're working with patients, when you're adjusting their blinds, or making sure their water is fresh, do you think about what you're going to say to them?" Maria considered the question. "Not really. I just talk to them like I would talk to anyone else." "Exactly," Patterson said with a smile. "That's exactly what makes you perfect for this interview. You're not trying to impress anyone or present a carefully crafted image. You're just being yourself, and that authenticity is what General Hayes found so compelling." He pulled out a folder from his desk drawer and opened it to reveal several printed articles and photographs. "I did some research after General Hayes's visit, looking into her background and the things she's written about military medical care. She's been advocating for years for a more holistic approach to treating wounded veterans, not just addressing their physical injuries, but also attending to their psychological and emotional needs." Patterson showed Maria a photograph from a medical journal article. It showed General Hayes visiting another military hospital, shaking hands with a doctor in front of an impressive array of high-tech medical equipment. This is the kind of image we usually see when military leaders visit hospitals. All very professional and official, focused on the technology and medical expertise. He then pulled out a photograph that had been taken during General Hayes's visit to their hospital the previous week. It showed the general standing in the hallway, engaged in conversation with Maria next to her cleaning cart. But this image tells a different story. It shows a general who takes the time to recognize and appreciate the contributions of every person who plays a role in caring for our wounded soldiers. Maria looked at the photograph with a mixture of amazement and discomfort. She barely recognized herself in the image. The woman in the photograph looked confident and dignified, engaged in what appeared to be a meaningful conversation with one of the most powerful women in the American military. "The story that General Hayes wants to tell isn't just about our hospital's medical capabilities," Patterson continued. "It's about our culture of care, the way everyone here, from the surgeons to the housekeeping staff, contributes to creating an environment where healing can happen. Your story is an essential part of that larger narrative." Despite Patterson's encouragement, Maria remained hesitant about the television interview. She spent the weekend thinking about it, discussing it with her mother, and trying to understand why this opportunity felt so important to everyone else but so frightening to her. Rosa Santos, despite her declining memory, seemed to understand the significance of what was happening better than Maria did. "Mija," she said as they sat together watching the evening news on Sunday night, "when I was your age, working at the textile factory, no one ever noticed the work I did. I sewed clothes for 30 years, and the only time anyone paid attention to me was when I made a mistake." Rosa reached over and took Maria's hand in her own. "But what you do, taking care of people who are hurt and scared, that's important work. If this general lady wants to tell people about it, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe other people will learn to notice the helpers, not just the ones who get all the credit." That Monday morning, Maria made a decision. She found Patterson in his office and told him she would agree to the television interview, but only under certain conditions. She wanted to know the questions in advance. She wanted Jennifer to be present during the filming, and she wanted the interview to focus primarily on the work that all the hospital staff did rather than on her personally. "Those are completely reasonable requests," Patterson assured her. "In fact, I think including Jennifer in the interview will make the segment even more powerful. Her perspective as a patient who has experienced your care firsthand will add credibility and emotional impact to the story." As the week progressed, Maria found herself feeling increasingly nervous but also increasingly determined to participate in the interview. She began to see it not as an opportunity for personal recognition, but as a chance to shed light on the important work that often went unnoticed in healthcare settings. She thought about all her colleagues in housekeeping, maintenance, food service, and other support roles who came to work every day and performed their jobs with dedication and care. She thought about the countless small acts of kindness and attention that happened throughout the hospital every day, but were rarely acknowledged or appreciated. Maybe this television segment could help people understand that healing required more than just medical expertise and sophisticated equipment. Maybe it could encourage other healthcare workers to pay attention to the small details that made such a big difference in patients' experiences. On Friday afternoon, as Maria was finishing her work in Ward 3A, she stopped by Jennifer's room for their daily conversation. Jennifer was now able to move around the ward in her wheelchair for several hours each day, and her physical therapy sessions were going so well that she was scheduled to be transferred to an outpatient rehabilitation facility within the next 2 weeks. "I'm going to miss our morning talks," Jennifer said as Maria entered the room. "You've become such an important part of my recovery process." "I'm going to miss them too," Maria replied, and she realized that she meant it sincerely. Over the past month, Jennifer had become more than just a patient. She had become a friend, someone whose perspective and encouragement had helped Maria see herself and her work in a completely different light. "Are you still planning to do the television interview?" Jennifer asked. Maria nodded. "Yes, I've decided to go through with it. I'm still terrified, but I think you're right about it being important. If it helps people understand the value of paying attention to each other's needs, then maybe my nervousness doesn't matter so much." Jennifer smiled. "That's exactly the attitude that made such a difference in my recovery. You were willing to step outside your comfort zone to help someone else, even when it would have been easier to just stick to the basic requirements of your job." As Maria prepared to leave for the weekend, she realized that Monday would bring the television crew and the interview that would potentially change how people saw her and her work. She was still nervous about the cameras and the questions, but she was no longer afraid. For the first time in her life, Maria Santos felt like she had something important to say, and she was ready to say it. Monday morning arrived with an unusual energy at Brooke Army Medical Center. The television crew from the National News Network had set up their equipment in the main conference room, and their presence added an atmosphere of importance and excitement that permeated the entire hospital. Maria arrived for work 30 minutes earlier than usual, hoping to complete some of her regular duties before the scheduled interview time. As she walked through the corridors with her cleaning cart, Maria noticed that everything looked slightly different through the lens of knowing that cameras would soon be documenting the hospital's operations. The walls seemed brighter, the medical equipment more impressive, and even the staff members appeared to be moving with extra purpose and attention to detail. James Patterson met her near the elevator bank at 9:30 a.m., carrying a clipboard and wearing the kind of focused expression that suggested he had been planning every detail of this day for weeks. "Good morning, Maria. Are you ready for this?" Maria took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be, I suppose. Are you sure they really want to interview me? It's not too late to change their minds." Patterson smiled reassuringly. "Trust me, after my conversation with the producer yesterday, they're very excited to meet you. General Hayes specifically emphasized that your story is central to the message she wants to convey about military healthcare." They walked together toward the conference room, where Maria could see television lights and cameras set up near the large windows that overlooked the hospital's main courtyard. Two people, a woman with perfectly styled hair wearing a business suit and a man with a professional camera, were discussing lighting angles and backdrop options. "Maria Santos, I'd like you to meet Rebecca Thompson from Channel 7 News," Patterson said as they approached the crew. "She'll be conducting the interview." Rebecca Thompson turned toward Maria with a warm, professional smile. She was younger than Maria had expected, probably in her early 30s, with the kind of polished appearance that made Maria immediately aware of her own simple uniform and practical hairstyle. "It's so nice to meet you, Maria," Rebecca said, extending her hand. "General Hayes spoke very highly of you when she contacted our station about this story. I'm really looking forward to hearing about your work here." Maria shook Rebecca's hand, trying to project more confidence than she actually felt. "Thank you for including me. I'm still not entirely sure what I can contribute to your story." "Oh, I think you'll be surprised," Rebecca replied. "Sometimes the most powerful stories come from people who don't realize how extraordinary their everyday actions really are." As the crew finished setting up their equipment, Patterson walked Maria through the basic structure of the interview. Rebecca would ask her about her role at the hospital, her approach to patient care, and her interaction with General Hayes. The segment would also include footage of Maria performing her normal work duties and a brief interview with Jennifer Rodriguez about her experience as a patient. "Remember, there are no wrong answers," Patterson encouraged her. "Just be yourself and speak from your heart about the work you do. At 10 a.m., the cameras began rolling. Rebecca started with some general questions about Maria's background and how long she had been working at the hospital. Maria found that once she began talking, the nervousness she had been feeling started to fade away. Rebecca had a natural way of asking questions that made the conversation feel more like a friendly chat than a formal interview. "Tell me about a typical day in your work," Rebecca asked. "What does providing care look like from your perspective?" Maria thought for a moment before responding. "I think most people assume that housekeeping is just about cleaning, emptying trash, mopping floors, restocking supplies. And those things are important, of course. But when you're working in a hospital, especially a hospital that treats wounded soldiers, you realize that your job is really about creating an environment where healing can happen." She paused, surprised by her own articulate response. She had never really put her philosophy into words before, but somehow, in front of the cameras, the thoughts were flowing naturally. "What I mean is, when someone is injured and far from home and scared about their future, little things can make a huge difference in their comfort and peace of mind. Making sure their room is not just clean, but welcoming. Paying attention to whether the lighting is too bright or too dim. Noticing if they seem lonely or anxious, and taking a few extra minutes to have a conversation." Rebecca nodded encouragingly. "Can you give me a specific example?" Maria found herself thinking about Jennifer, but also about dozens of other patients she had cared for over the years. "Well, there was a young soldier who had lost his hearing in an explosion. I noticed that he seemed startled every time someone entered his room, because he couldn't hear them approaching. So I started making sure to position myself where he could see me before I began working, and I learned a few basic sign language phrases so I could communicate with him more effectively." "You learned sign language for one patient?" "Just a few phrases," Maria said, feeling embarrassed by the attention. "It wasn't a big deal. I checked out a book from the library and practiced during my lunch breaks. It only took a couple of weeks to learn enough to say good morning, and how are you feeling, and is there anything you need?" Rebecca exchanged a meaningful look with her cameraman before turning back to Maria. "That's exactly the kind of thing General Hayes was talking about when she described your approach to patient care. Tell me about your meeting with her." Maria described the encounter with General Hayes, trying to convey not just what had been said, but how unprecedented it felt to receive that kind of recognition from someone so important. She talked about her surprise that Jennifer had mentioned her to the general, and her amazement that her small acts of care had been noticed and appreciated. "What did that recognition mean to you?" Rebecca asked. Maria considered the question carefully. "For 15 years, I've come to work every day thinking that my job was necessary, but not particularly important. I knew I was helping keep the hospital clean and organized, but I didn't really think about the impact my work might have on patients' experiences." She paused, feeling emotional as she continued. "When General Hayes took the time to personally thank me for what I do, it changed how I see myself and my work. It made me realize that every job in a hospital, from the surgeons to the people who clean the rooms, is part of a larger mission to help people heal." After the formal interview, the cameras followed Maria through part of her normal work routine. Rebecca asked her to explain what she was doing as she cleaned rooms, organized supplies, and interacted with patients and staff members. Maria felt self-conscious at first, aware that every movement and word was being recorded, but gradually she relaxed into her normal rhythms and procedures. The most powerful moment of the filming came when they visited Jennifer's room. Jennifer had prepared carefully for the interview, wearing her military dress uniform rather than hospital clothes, and she was clearly excited to participate in the segment. "Jennifer, can you tell us about Maria's role in your recovery?" Rebecca asked. Jennifer's face lit up as she began to speak. "When I first arrived here, I was in a really dark place emotionally. I was dealing with physical pain, but I was also struggling with fear about my future, anxiety about my injuries, and just a general sense of being lost and disconnected from everything that had previously given my life meaning." She looked directly at Maria as she continued. "The medical staff here did an incredible job treating my physical injuries. But Maria did something equally important. She helped me feel like I mattered as a person, not just as a medical case. Every day, she would notice small things about my comfort and well-being, and she would take action to make things better without being asked." Jennifer described the specific ways Maria had cared for her, changing the television channel from disturbing news coverage to peaceful programming, keeping her water pitcher filled with fresh ice, adjusting the blinds to optimize the lighting in her room, and, most importantly, taking time each day to have genuine conversations about her recovery and her concerns. But the thing that meant the most to me, Jennifer concluded, was that Maria saw me as a whole person. She paid attention to my emotional and psychological needs, not just my physical environment. That kind of attention and care made an enormous difference in my healing process. As the interview with Jennifer concluded, Rebecca turned back to Maria. After hearing Jennifer describe the impact of your care, how do you feel about the work you do? Maria looked at Jennifer, then back at Rebecca, and realized that she had never felt more proud of her profession than she did at that moment. I feel like I understand now that what I do is important. Not just the cleaning and organizing, but the caring and noticing and paying attention. I've learned that healing requires more than just medical procedures. It requires creating an environment where people feel safe and valued and cared for. She paused, then added, I also feel a responsibility to do this work even better than I have been doing it. If my attention to detail can make a difference in someone's recovery, then I want to make sure I'm paying attention to every patient every day. After the cameras stopped rolling, Rebecca approached Maria to thank her personally for participating in the interview. I have to tell you, Maria, this is one of the most moving interviews I've conducted in my 5 years as a journalist. Your story really illustrates something important about how healing happens. Rebecca explained that the segment would air the following Friday evening as part of a special report on military healthcare innovation. General Hayes will be providing commentary throughout the segment, placing your story in the broader context of her vision for comprehensive patient care. As the television crew packed up their equipment, Maria found herself reflecting on the morning's events. The interview had been less intimidating than she had feared, and she felt good about the message she had been able to convey about the importance of holistic patient care. But more than that, she realized that the process of articulating her approach to her work had helped her understand her own motivations and values more clearly. She had never really thought of herself as having a philosophy about patient care, but the interview had revealed that she did indeed have strong beliefs about the importance of treating people with dignity and attention. That evening, as Maria was preparing to leave the hospital, she was stopped by Dr. Martinez, who had heard about the television interview from other staff members. I wanted to congratulate you on the interview today, Dr. Martinez said. I think it's wonderful that your approach to patient care is going to be highlighted in this way. I hope it encourages other healthcare workers to think more broadly about their roles. Maria thanked Dr. Martinez, but something in the doctor's tone suggested that she had more to say. Is there something else? Dr. Martinez smiled. Actually, yes. I've been thinking about our conversation from last week, when you mentioned that you had originally wanted to become a teacher. I don't know if you're aware of this, but the hospital has a patient advocacy program that trains staff members to provide additional support and guidance to patients and their families. Maria wasn't familiar with the program, so Dr. Martinez explained that patient advocates served as liaisons between patients and the medical staff, helping to address concerns, provide emotional support, and ensure that patients' non-medical needs were being met. The position requires some additional training, but it's exactly the kind of work you're already doing informally, Dr. Martinez continued. I think you would be perfect for it, and it would be a way to expand your impact beyond just the patients in your cleaning rotation. Maria was intrigued by the possibility, but also overwhelmed by the idea of taking on such a significant new responsibility. I don't know if I'm qualified for something like that. Maria, you've been providing patient advocacy for years without realizing it, Dr. Martinez replied. The training would just give you additional tools and formal recognition for work you're already doing naturally. As Maria rode the bus home that evening, she thought about Dr. Martinez's suggestion. The idea of becoming a patient advocate both excited and terrified her. It would mean stepping even further outside her comfort zone, taking on responsibilities she had never imagined for herself. But it would also mean being able to help more patients in more meaningful ways. It would mean using the insights she had gained from 15 years of observing patient needs and finding ways to meet them. When she arrived home, Maria found her mother watching the evening news in their small living room. Rosa Santos looked up as her daughter entered, and Maria was struck by how alert and engaged her mother seemed. How did your television interview go, Mija? Rosa asked. Maria sat down next to her mother and described the events of the day, the conversation with Rebecca Thompson, the formal interview, the time spent with Jennifer, and Dr. Martinez's suggestion about the patient advocacy program. Rosa listened carefully to everything Maria told her, occasionally asking questions or making encouraging comments. When Maria finished her account, her mother was quiet for several moments, seemingly lost in thought. "You know, Maria," Rosa finally said, "when you were a little girl, you were always the one who noticed when I was sad or worried, even when I tried to hide it from you. You would bring me little drawings you had made or find ways to make me laugh. I used to think that was just because you were a sensitive child." Rosa reached over and took Maria's hand. "But I think I was wrong. I think you were already practicing to be the person you are now, someone who pays attention to other people's needs and finds ways to help them feel better." Maria felt tears forming in her eyes as she listened to her mother's words. She had never connected her childhood behavior to her adult approach to patient care, but Rosa's observation felt profoundly true. "Maybe this patient advocate job is just the next step in something you've been preparing for your whole life," Rosa concluded. That night, as Maria lay in bed thinking about the day's events, she realized that her encounter with General Hayes had started a chain of changes that were still unfolding. The recognition from the general had led to the television interview, which had helped her articulate her philosophy about patient care, which had led to Dr. Martinez's suggestion about becoming a patient advocate. For the first time in her adult life, Maria Santos felt like she was moving towards something instead of just going through the motions of each day. She felt like she had discovered not just what she was good at, but what she was meant to do. And she was ready to take the next step. The television segment aired on Friday evening at 6:30 p.m., during the primetime news hour when millions of people across the country were settling down to learn about the day's events. Maria had arranged to watch it with her mother in their small living room, both of them sitting nervously on the couch as the familiar news anchor introduced the special report on military health care. "Tonight, we take you inside Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, Texas, where a four-star general's recent visit revealed something remarkable about the nature of healing and care," the anchor announced. "Our Rebecca Thompson has the story." Maria's heart began racing as the segment began. The first images showed the exterior of the hospital where she had worked for 15 years, followed by footage of medical personnel treating patients and sophisticated equipment in operation. General Hayes appeared on screen, explaining her vision for comprehensive military health care that addresses not just physical injuries, but the emotional and psychological needs of wounded soldiers. When Maria first appeared on screen, she barely recognized herself. The woman in the television segment looked confident and articulate, someone who clearly cared deeply about her work and had thoughtful insights about patient care. It was startling to see herself from an outside perspective, to realize that others might see her very differently than she saw herself. "I think most people assume that housekeeping is just about cleaning," her televised voice was saying. "But when you're working in a hospital, especially a hospital that treats wounded soldiers, you realize that your job is really about creating an environment where healing can happen." Rosa Santos reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand. "Look at you, Mija. You sound so professional, so confident. I'm so proud of you." The segment continued with footage of Maria performing her normal work duties, but the camera captured details that made her routine tasks look purposeful and important. When she adjusted a patient's blinds to reduce glare on their television screen, the action appeared thoughtful and caring rather than simply mechanical. When she took time to speak with a patient while organizing their bedside supplies, the interaction looked like meaningful human connection rather than just workplace politeness. Jennifer's interview provided powerful testimony about the impact of Maria's care. "Maria saw me as a whole person," Jennifer said on screen, her military uniform adding authority to her words. "She paid attention to my emotional and psychological needs, not just my physical environment. That kind of attention and care made an enormous difference in my healing process." The segment concluded with General Hayes providing broader context for Maria's story. "What Maria Santos represents is the kind of comprehensive care that our wounded veterans deserve," the general explained. "Healing requires more than just medical expertise. It requires creating an environment where people feel valued and supported by everyone who touches their lives." The camera then showed the moment when General Hayes had stopped her hospital tour to personally thank Maria, with the general's voice providing narration. "When I met Maria during my visit to Brooke Army Medical Center, I was reminded of what military medicine is supposed to be about, taking care of our people in every possible way." Her story illustrates that excellent healthcare is a team effort that includes everyone from surgeons to the people who ensure that patients feel comfortable and cared for every single day. As the segment ended and the regular news programming resumed, Maria sat in stunned silence. She had expected to feel embarrassed or uncomfortable seeing herself on television, but instead she felt something she had never experienced before, a sense that her story mattered, that her work had meaning beyond just completing daily tasks. "Maria," her mother said softly, "do you understand what just happened? Millions of people just learned about the important work you do. You've probably inspired other people to think differently about caring for others." Over the next several days, the impact of the television segment became apparent in ways Maria had never anticipated. The hospital's main phone line received dozens of calls from viewers who wanted to express their appreciation for Maria's approach to patient care. Several other hospitals contacted the administration to ask about implementing similar comprehensive care programs. More personally meaningful to Maria were the responses from current and former patients. Jennifer, who had been transferred to an outpatient rehabilitation facility, called to say that several other wounded soldiers had seen the segment and were inspired by the message about holistic healing. A veteran named Michael Chin sent a letter describing how the segment had reminded him of a nurse's aide who had made his own recovery experience more bearable through small acts of kindness that he had never properly acknowledged. Dr. Martinez approached Maria on Tuesday morning with news that would change the trajectory of her career. "The hospital administration has approved a new patient advocacy program, and they've asked me to recommend candidates for the first training class," she said with obvious excitement. "I immediately thought of you." Maria felt her pulse quicken. "Are you sure I'm qualified? I don't have any formal training in counseling or social work." "You have something more valuable than formal training," Dr. Martinez replied. "You have natural empathy and excellent observational skills, and you understand how to connect with people who are going through difficult experiences. The formal training will give you additional tools, but you already possess the most important qualifications." The patient advocacy training program would require Maria to attend classes 2 evenings per week for 6 months, covering topics like crisis counseling, family communication, healthcare navigation, and conflict resolution. Upon completion, she would be certified to work with patients and families who needed additional emotional support, help communicating with medical staff, or assistance understanding their treatment options. The position would also involve training other staff members about patient-centered care, Dr. Martinez continued. "The administration wants to expand your approach to patient comfort and attention throughout the hospital." Maria realized this was an opportunity to influence not just individual patient experiences, but the entire culture of care at the hospital. She could help other staff members understand how their daily interactions with patients could contribute to healing in ways that went far beyond their primary job responsibilities. "When would the training begin?" Maria asked. "Next month, if you're interested." "And Maria, there's something else. General Hayes has agreed to serve as an honorary advisor to the program. She's committed to helping us develop a model that could be implemented at military hospitals nationwide." The prospect of working with General Hayes in any capacity was both thrilling and intimidating. But Maria was beginning to understand that meaningful growth required stepping outside her comfort zone, and she was ready to embrace that challenge. "I would like to participate in the training program," Maria said, surprised by the firmness in her own voice. Over the following weeks, as Maria prepared to begin her new training, she continued her regular housekeeping duties with renewed energy and purpose. But now she approached her work with the knowledge that her attention to patient care was valued and would soon be expanded into a more formal role. She also began to notice changes in how other staff members interacted with patients. Several housekeeping colleagues mentioned that the television segment had inspired them to pay more attention to patient comfort during their cleaning routines. Nurses reported that they were taking more time to address patients' non-medical concerns. Even some of the doctors had started asking patients about their emotional well-being in addition to their physical symptoms. Jennifer returned to visit the hospital 6 weeks after the television segment aired, walking without assistance and clearly thriving in her recovery. She sought out Maria to share news about her own future plans. "I've decided to go back to school to become a licensed clinical social worker," Jennifer announced. "I want to specialize in helping veterans navigate their transitions back to civilian life." In a way, our conversations during my recovery helped me realize that I'm drawn to the same kind of work you do, paying attention to people's needs and finding ways to help them feel supported. Maria was deeply moved by Jennifer's decision. To think that their daily conversations had influenced Jennifer's career path was both humbling and inspiring. It reinforced her growing understanding that human connections and care could have profound, long-lasting effects that extended far beyond the immediate situation. I'm starting my master's program in the fall, Jennifer continued. But I wanted to ask you something. Would you consider being a guest speaker in one of my classes? I think social work students would benefit from hearing about your approach to patient advocacy. The idea of speaking to graduate students was daunting, but Maria found herself saying yes. She was beginning to see that sharing her insights about patient care wasn't just about personal recognition. It was about potentially influencing a new generation of healthcare workers to think more comprehensively about their roles. As Maria's first patient advocacy training class approached, she received an unexpected phone call at home. The caller identified herself as Captain Sarah Williams from General Hayes' office at the Pentagon. Ms. Santos, General Hayes asked me to contact you about a special project she's developing, Captain Williams explained. The General is creating a task force to develop new standards for patient-centered care throughout the military medical system. She would like to invite you to participate as a consultant. Maria nearly dropped the phone. A consultant? But I don't have any expertise in policy development.